Chapter 931. On the king's throne, Gilgamesh, assisted by Siduri, was efficiently handling the various matters on the clay tablets. "Oh Henryong, you're back." Even when he saw that the visitor was Wuming, Gilgamesh didn't put down the clay tablet in his hand. Instead, he looked at the clay tablet while chatting with Wuming. Siduri slightly bowed to Wuming and Ishtar. She couldn't interrupt the conversation between the king and the god at this moment. Moreover, she still needed to classify the clay tablets that Gilgamesh processed, so she couldn't get away for a while. "After all, I was tricked by Gorgon. How can I not come back?" Wuming responded to Gilgamesh with a gentle smile. "Ah yes, it's not in your character to not respond to Gorgon." Gilgamesh put down the clay tablet in his hand. This was the last one that needed to be processed. Afterward, Gilgamesh raised his head and looked at Wuming, one high and one low, and smiled. If people who didn't know saw this scene, they would probably think that this was a beautiful scene of the king and his subjects having a heart-to-heart talk. However, Gadotsi felt that something was wrong. It was as if Gorgon, who Wuming and Gilgamesh were thinking about, was going to be in big trouble. Then, Gilgamesh looked at Siduri, who had already sorted the clay tablets. Siduri, pass the processed clay tablets to the various departments. "Yes, king, I'll do it right away." After Siduri bowed, she and the guards ran down from the king's throne with a portion of the clay tablets. Just when she passed by Wuming and Ishtar, Siduri paused again and bowed to the two of them. Unlike Gilgamesh, Siduri still respected the gods, especially the Uruk Henryong and the Uruk city god Ishtar. "Oh, isn't this the stupid goddess who ran away from home? How did you know to come back today?" Gilgamesh tilted his body and supported his chin with one hand as if he had just noticed Ishtar. His tone was full of sarcasm. Ishtar would definitely explode if she heard Gilgamesh's words, but Wuming glared at Ishtar, indicating that she shouldn't mess around and stay put. Ugh! Like a powder keg that had expanded to the limit but couldn't explode, Ishtar pouted, clasped her hands, and turned her head away. There was even a faint mist above her head. "Oh, looks like you've trained this stupid goddess well, Henryong." Gilgamesh was surprised by Ishtar's forbearance. Although he didn't show it on his face, Gilgamesh was actually very surprised. After all, anyone who knew Ishtar knew that she and Gilgamesh were the most incompatible. Even Wuming's relationship with Ishtar was better than Gilgamesh's relationship with Ishtar. But in the face of Gilgamesh's sarcasm and ridicule, Ishtar actually endured it. If it weren't for the fact that Ishtar's divinity in front of him really belonged to Ishtar, Gilgamesh would have thought that someone was pretending to be Ishtar. "I just used some small tricks, king. I think if it were you, you would have guessed my tricks even if I tried to hide them." In an instant, Gilgamesh understood what Wuming meant by tricks. It was nothing more than starting with Ishtar's weakness, probably using money to coerce her. That was indeed the case. When Ishtar knew that she would be forced by Wuming to follow him to the Uruk, Ishtar cursed Wuming and all kinds of rumors and slanders blurted out. Although it wasn't to an amazing extent, after Gadotsi, Matthew and others heard it, it could be said that it changed the image of Ishtar in their hearts. After that, Wuming briefly separated Ishtar from the crowd in the southwest jungle. During this period, Wuming said something to Ishtar. "If you can listen to me obediently and keep your mouth shut, I will fight for 1/10 of the Babylon treasury for you as your reward." This made Ishtar's eyes suddenly shine, but Wuming's request was not that simple. "Of course, if you can hold back when facing Gil, I will fight for 1/10 of the Babylon treasury for you as an additional reward. However, if you don't listen to me and can't hold back, all these rewards will be cancelled, and your original rewards will be reduced by half." The first half of the sentence made Ishtar's eyes shine even brighter, but the second half of the sentence made Ishtar's eyes shine even brighter. Ishtar began to calculate in her heart. If everything went well, she could finally get 25% of the treasures in the Babylon treasury, which was a quarter. However, if it didn't go well, she could only get less than 10% of the treasures, which was directly reduced from a quarter to a 20th. It's easy, right? Just don't lose your temper and be obedient, and you will have a chance to get 25% of the treasures in the Babylon treasury. If you lose your temper and don't listen to me, you will only be left with 5% of the treasures. Although 5% of the treasures is indeed a lot, It is not even 10%. Tsk. Wu Ming's words echoed around Ishtar, whose eyes began to spin. Gradually, Ishtar, who could not resist the temptation, chose to fall into the devil's trap. Ishtar covered her head, and her eyes were downcast as she finally made the final decision. Ah, I know. I will be obedient. The power of money once again played its role. In short, Gilgamesh's guess was not far from the truth. Gadotsi and the others thought that Ishtar had become so obedient because of the influence of the forced contract. Who would have thought that Wu Ming would still use money and treasures to make Ishtar choose to compromise? This king is so happy today. This king will not pursue the crime of abducting Chaldea that this king sent to support the Quetzalcoatl. Gilgamesh could not help but look at the Chaldea led by Gadotsi. Although they were Chaldea, only Gadotsi and Matthew could be considered as Chaldea's people. Anna was brought by Merlin, and Merlin was only sent by Gilgamesh to support Gadotsi and Matthew. Although Olga Marie and her vampire follower Parmelia had completed their seclusion at the end of the previous singularity, according to Roman's explanation, the Holy Grail that sealed the entire concept of Florence underwent a mutation. Something followed the demon god pillar Florence and groped its way to Chaldea. Chapter 932. Although Chaldea was located in the Antarctic continent, other than Chaldea, all other places were burned by Gidea. Therefore, Chaldea, which survived under the influence of the magnetic field, could be said to be an alternative singularity. When everyone in the world is crazy, and only one person is sober, the one who is sober is the crazy one. That was more or less the case. When the whole world was burned by Gidea, Chaldea, which was lucky enough to survive, became an existence similar to a singularity. To put it simply, Chaldea could no longer be regarded as an institution that still existed in the Antarctic continent. Chaldea should be treated as an existence similar to other singularities. Therefore, if someone wanted to invade Chaldea, they must first find Chaldea. However, this was full of difficulties. The reason why Chaldea was able to discover singularities was because Chaldea had three important things: Earth Environment Model, Chaldea Yasnir Future Observation Lens, Sheba Psychic Calculation Device. Trismegistes. With the cooperation of the three, singularities could be discovered, and through Chaldea's psychic transfer technology, human masters could be sent to various eras. If one wanted to discover the location of Chaldea, they probably didn't need to go through so much trouble. However, Chaldea wasn't easy to discover either. However, probably because Chaldea took in Floros, who was sealed in the Golden Holy Grail by Wu Ming, some unknown existence used this as a medium to discover Chaldea. Currently, it was on its way to Chaldea. The existence in a certain location was probably Gidea. Wu Ming thought so. However, Wu Ming thought that this was impossible. Floros was sealed by his own power, coupled with the influence of Chaldea's magnetic field. It was impossible for Gidea to discover him. Unless Gaia had become even more powerful, she would be able to find the current location of Floros through her previous relationship with him. Fortunately, because Chaldea's equipment was quite advanced, they discovered it in time. After that, Olga Marie used her half-mature third method to cooperate with her vampire follower, Parmelia, to add an additional layer of seal to the Holy Grail that sealed Floros, preventing the unknown existence from advancing. However, the price was that Olga Marie and Parmelia couldn't leave the Golden Holy Grail that sealed Floros for the time being. Therefore, Roman was still the commander, and Parmelia couldn't go to the singularity in Mesopotamia with Gadotsi and Matthew. However, if Olga Marie was the commander in Chaldea, there was a high chance that she would quarrel with Gilgamesh. After all, with Olga Marie's temper, how could she tolerate Gilgamesh making Gadotsi and Matthew spend so much time doing odd jobs? Fortunately, Roman was the temporary commander. After all, Roman's personality was more gentle. For example, at this moment, Roman, who was monitoring in Chaldea, was in a mess because of Gilgamesh's speech. What should we do? Leonardo da Vinci? I guess that King Gilgamesh would be angry? On the contrary, Leonardo da Vinci was quite calm. Isn't the villa still with Tachika and the others? Don't worry, Wu Ming wouldn't let Gadotsi and Matthew be punished, but in fact Gilgamesh had no intention of punishing the two at all. However, he still had to say what needed to be said. Wuming walked in front of Gadotsi and Matthew and looked at Gilgamesh defensively. I was the one who made them change their plan, and they also had a part to play in getting Ishtar to join us. Yes, this can be considered as making up for their mistakes. Merlin also stood beside Gadotsi and the others and said something good. Although Ishtar is a stupid goddess, she is still somewhat useful. However, it is true that she has violated this king's will, and Hyenryong was the one who instigated her to do so. Logically speaking, she should be guilty of the same crime. Hearing this, Ishtar, whose back was facing Gilgamesh, tried her best to hold back her anger. In the end, she couldn't stand it anymore and said, "I'm going out for a walk, Uruk. Don't worry about me." Then she flew away. You stupid goddess. Gilgamesh's anger was completely understandable. That's right, Ishtar summoned the horse Anna to break through the ceiling again. This king will remember it on your head, Hyenryong. Gilgamesh stared at Wuming with annoyance. However, this king will not delay the proper business. That will be your punishment. In fact, Gilgamesh often used his clairvoyance to see things when he took a short break. Coincidentally, Gilgamesh inadvertently saw the matter between Wuming and Gadotsi and the others. Therefore, Gilgamesh knew very well that Gadotsi and Matthew did not actually see the contents of the slate that he asked the small pterosaur to send to the south. In fact, Gilgamesh only wanted to train Gadotsi and Matthew. After all, the two of them were really immature and needed more training. Gilgamesh once heard from Merlin that Gadotsi and Matthew had received a lot of help from Wuming along the way. The two of them missed a lot of opportunities to train. Although this did make the path they took less difficult, Gilgamesh would make up for the lack of training along the way in his Uruk for Gadotsi and Matthew. It is true that you did not follow this king's orders. Now listen to this king of Chaldea. Gilgamesh's voice suddenly became louder, which made Gadotsi and Matthew straighten their backs. It seemed that they were going to be punished. Yes, Gadotsi and Matthew responded in unison. You have indeed made a certain contribution in welcoming back the Uruk god. But you did not have the slightest effect on stopping the demonic beasts that crossed over the northwest mountains. Therefore, your merits cannot offset your faults. Siduri will arrange a new task for you later. Now, go back to your Chaldean embassy and rest. Gadotsi and Matthew, who originally thought that they would be severely punished by Gilgamesh, were stunned. The punishment given by Gilgamesh was probably quite mild. Is there a problem? Seeing the two stunned, Gilgamesh looked down at them with his scarlet eyes. This cold and harsh gaze made Gadotsi and Matthew come back to their senses. Yes, no problem. Gilgamesh nodded with satisfaction, then looked at Merlin and Anna. Merlin, this king does not want to comment on your dereliction of duty. You will be punished the same as Chaldea. As for Anna, that's it. You may leave. Chapter 933. Yes, thank you, King Gilgamesh, for your magnanimity. Merlin bowed to Gilgamesh with his cane, but he didn't leave. Instead, he stood aside and waited quietly. Anna didn't speak. She just bowed slightly to Gilgamesh, then left the throne room. She was just a follower, abducted by Merlin. It was only because of the agreement with Merlin that Anna obediently stayed in Uruk. And Gilgamesh also recognized Anna's identity. Therefore, the bow to Gilgamesh was just for show. More importantly, compared to the throne room, which was filled with the unique aura of clay tablets, she preferred the flower shop owned by a kind old lady in Uruk. Not only because of the fragrance of the flower shop, but also because Anna felt warmth in the flower shop. At this time, Matthew stood up and asked, "That King Gilgamesh v. Hyenryong, where is Sir? Is he not with us?" It seemed that Matthew was still a little unaccustomed to Wuming's name in this singularity. Gadotsi was also concerned about Wuming's punishment. After all, only Wuming wasn't punished or ordered by Gilgamesh. How could she rest assured? This king and Hyenryong have other important matters to discuss. You don't have to ask. However, immediately afterward, Merlin leaned over to Gadotsi and Matthew and whispered. Ignoring Merlin's actions, Gilgamesh turned his head and looked at Musasobo Benkei, who stood aside without saying a word. Also Lackner. Musasobo Benkei, who was silent and seemingly inconspicuous, responded to Gilgamesh. Yes, King Gilgamesh, Lakner Musasobo Benkei is here. With one hand on the razor, Musasobo Benkei knelt on one knee in front of Gilgamesh. As you can see, Hyunryong and others have resolved the crisis in the northwest and returned to Uruk. You can rest assured. Yes, yes, King Gilgamesh. Musasobo Benkei looked a little absent-minded. With the strength of his legs, Musasobo Benkei quickly returned to the Uruk to report to Gilgamesh. However, when Musasobo Benkei met with Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh calmly told Musasobo Benkei not to worry. Hyunryong and Ishtar have already resolved it. You just wait here. After Gilgamesh left such a sentence, Musasobo Benkei was left in the throne of the God Tower by Gilgamesh. This made Musasobo Benkei feel quite conflicted. As for what he was conflicted about, to be honest, Musasobo Benkei didn't know himself. Ever since he escaped from Operation Decapitation, Musasobo Benkei felt a little lost in his heart. Musasobo Benkei feared that history would repeat itself. Although he did save Nuwakamaru, that was only because Nuwakamaru was close to him. As a subject, he couldn't watch Nuwakamaru die at such a close distance. However, in other words, if the distance was far, perhaps Musasobo Benkei would abandon Nuwakamaru and escape alone, just like Lord Haifeng of Changlu who abandoned the Minamoto Sutra and escaped. He didn't want to see that scene and didn't want history to repeat itself. However, he was indeed afraid of facing the demonic beast commander. Regarding this, Musasobo Benkei was confused. Gilgamesh, who saw Musasobo Benkei's confusion, lost interest in Musasobo Benkei. No matter what, a soldier could only be called a qualified soldier if he was undistracted. The Uruk soldiers were full of faith in fighting against the demonic beasts and protecting their families. As for Musasobo Benkei, although he was stronger than the Uruk soldiers, his heart was not firm. Gilgamesh definitely wouldn't use such a person. If he gave an important mission to him, it would definitely ruin things in the end. Moreover, the risk brought by Musasobo Benkei's confusion was far more than that. At present, it was just that there was no fuse. If there was a fuse, the impact of the explosion would make Musasobo Benkei leave the Uruk silently like a walking corpse. Although he would eventually recover as a heroic spirit, the danger brought by the demonic beasts was too dangerous. The lack of any combat power would put the human side at a disadvantage. Therefore, Gilgamesh couldn't leave Musasobo Benkei alone. Keeping Musasobo Benkei was the temporary solution to deal with this unstable factor. Speaking of unstable factors, Ibaraki Boy, who escaped and occupied the mountain, was also one of them. 3 months ago, Ibaraki Boy was among the 10 servants who carried out the beheading operation. Gilgamesh couldn't help but recall the situation at that time. Because the situation at that time was very bad, after one of the demonic beast commanders, Mushio and Hushio, attacked the Uruk, and Okitasoki's spiritual base collapsed and left, Gilgamesh immediately planned the beheading operation against the demonic beast commander. He summoned servants to form an assassination team to assassinate the demonic beast commander. The strength of the servants only needed to be able to get close to and kill the demonic beast commander, because this was a group of suicide squad. And Gilgamesh's suicide squad certainly couldn't let go of Ibaraki Boy, who was still occupying the mountain. Therefore, Gilgamesh summoned 7 new servants early in the morning, and let Shiro Amakusa lead the team to carry out the plan to kill Ibaraki Boy. Ibaraki Boy was a super unstable factor. Even if he didn't join the suicide squad as a consumable, he couldn't be left alive and must be eliminated. And Shiro Amakusa and the others, because Zhuge Kongming followed them, plus the strength of the servants, they directly captured Ibaraki Boy and brought him back to the Uruk. After setting a curse on Ibaraki Boy's spiritual base that could make it explode, Ibaraki Boy naturally entered the suicide squad and carried out the beheading operation. This was probably what was meant by waste. By the way, during the beheading operation, Ibaraki Boy was in the same team as Bayuzin and Shiro Amakusa. After all, even if the curse was used to threaten Ibaraki Boy's spiritual base, it couldn't be considered that everything was fine. Ibaraki Boy was a berserker. Therefore, Ibaraki Boy formed a team with 2 rather steady people. Those 2 people were Bayuzin and Shiro Amakusa. However, Even if there were two steady people watching over Ibaraki Boy still made a mess in the end. Ba Yuzin and one of the demonic beast commanders, the Scorpion Man Kitabliru, died together. Chapter 934. Because of Ibaraki Dojo's mischief, the Scorpion Man Kitabliru used his stinger to hit Ba Yuqian, causing Ba Yuqian to be seriously injured. Ba Yuqian knew that his spirit core had been destroyed, so he decided to take Kitabliru down with him. As for Ibaraki Dojo, Shiro Amakusa definitely wouldn't let him go. Although the servants who carried out the decapitation operation didn't think of returning to Uruk alive, killing a few more demonic beast commanders was good. In the end, because of Ibaraki Dojo's influence, Ba Yuqian had no choice but to take Ibaraki Dojo down with him. If it wasn't for the insurance method engraved on Ibaraki Dojo's spirit core exploding to cover for Shiro Amakusa, allowing Shiro Amakusa to take the opportunity to escape from the demonic beast horde, he probably wouldn't have been able to escape. Again, they were a suicide squad. After agreeing to Gilgamesh's plan, the servants who carried out the decapitation operation had already disregarded life and death. The reason why Shiro Amakusa cherished his life so much was because he had to do his best to kill as many demonic beast commanders as possible. Everything was for the sake of humanity. It turned out that the servants were worthy of being called heroes in human history. Yagyu, one of the strongest swordsmen in the Jianghu era, Masho Zongmo, and the ancestor of martial arts in the East, Kasaliku, worked together to kill Kasaliku, who had great brute strength. However, the two of them were also seriously injured. Extreme strength could overwhelm all techniques, and that was what Kasaliku did. Although the two spirit cores were intact, their spirit cores were completely destroyed. They were completely defeated by the remaining demonic beasts. Fumakotaro and Kataduanzo, who were also wind demon ninjas, used ninjutsu to deal with the formless Umudaburutu, who was known as the Tempest. However, with the help of Shiro Amakusa, the three of them managed to kill Umudaburutu by taking him down with them. However, although the servants were killing one by one, the demonic beast commanders weren't that easy to kill. Even with Zhuge Kongming's plan, which scattered the demonic beast commanders one by one, and catching them off guard, the servants still managed to kill the demonic beast commanders by taking them down with them. However, at this time the other demonic beast commanders finally discovered the problem. So, the demonic beast commanders began to surround the remaining servants and surround them, preparing to annihilate them in one fell swoop. At that time, through the connection between Gilgamesh and the servants, Gilgamesh remotely received the news that several demonic beast commanders were successfully killed, but at the same time, he lost contact with those servants. No one knew what Gilgamesh was thinking at that time. He was still dealing with government affairs. Gilgamesh knew very well that the servants he sent out had no ability to break through the encirclement of countless demonic beasts. Even if they could break through the encirclement, they would still be hunted down by the demonic beasts. There was no way they would be able to return to the North Wall in time. And Gilgamesh wouldn't deploy a large number of soldiers to support a few servants because it was likely that a large number of soldiers would be sacrificed. However, because the strength of these servants was not enough, Gilgamesh could maintain so many servants at one time. If they were like Wu Ming, the amount of servants he provided would be more than enough for Gilgamesh to go to the underworld. However, although Gilgamesh's heart was heavy, he didn't regret it. The so-called heroic spirits were existences that fought for the future of humanity. They were existences that risked everything for the sake of humanity. The so-called Suicide Squad proved this point. It was precisely because they understood that they would not be able to return that the servants agreed to form a Suicide Squad. Fortunately, Gadatsi and the others came late. If they came early, perhaps they wouldn't have allowed such a thing to happen. After all, whether it was Gadatsi or Matthew, they were quite emotional people. However, it was precisely because of such human beings that the servants rushed into the demonic beasts without hesitation. Glancing at Gadatsi and Matthew, who continued to whisper to Merlin, Gilgamesh showed a puzzled look. After returning to his senses, Gilgamesh looked at Musasobo Benkei again. The fact that Musasobo Benkei and Nuwakamaru could survive was also within Gilgamesh's expectation. He saw it through his clairvoyance. Berserker Darius III, who teamed up with Musasobo Benkei and Nuwakamaru, was accidentally discovered by the demonic beast commander. Nuwakamaru wanted to kill the demonic beast commander recklessly. Musasobo Benkei had a fear of death, but because he was unwilling to abandon his former master in front of him to die again, he resolutely took Nuwakamaru and fled the battlefield when Darius III couldn't hold on anymore. They successfully survived along the Tigris River. However, Nuwakamaru, who survived, regained her fighting spirit. In order to make up for her failure, she continued to work hard under Gilgamesh to complete the tasks given to her by Gilgamesh. Since then, Musasobo Benkei had changed. To put it nicely, he had lost the motivation to continue fighting. To put it bluntly, he had become a soulless zombie. At this moment, Musasobo Benkei's expression was like this. Seeing this scene, Gilgamesh couldn't help but frown. But this doesn't mean that this king doesn't need to set up a stronghold in the northwest. Set off immediately and return to the temporary stronghold in the northwest. Rendezvous with Ryder and wait for this king's subsequent orders. Sure enough, Gilgamesh couldn't stand such an expression. It was too disgusting. A hero who left his name in human history should look like a hero. Yes, King Gilgamesh, Musasobo Benkei replied, then left the tower without stopping. Then Gilgamesh looked at Merlin, Gadotsi, and Matthew, who were still muttering nonstop. What are you muttering about? Return to the Chaldean embassy and rest as soon as possible. Yes, then, King, I'll take my leave first. But Tachika and Matthew seem to have something to discuss with you and Lord Hyunryong. I won't disturb you. Merlin finished speaking and left by himself. Is that so? Gilgamesh looked at Gadotsi and Matthew. Then what else do you want? That. Gadotsi smiled awkwardly. What was there to discuss? Merlin clearly said that he could see Zhuge Kongming if he stayed, but in the end he sold her and Matthew out. Why don't we let Tachika follow? After all, she is Chaldea's ambassador to Uruk. Wuming suggested half-jokingly. Some things could indeed involve Chaldea's people. Forget it. This king is in a good mood today. This king and Hyunryong are going somewhere. If you don't want to return to the Chaldean embassy to rest, you can choose to follow. Gadotsi and Matthew's eyes lit up. If Merlin was right, they should be able to see Zhuge Kongming next. Yes, King Gilgamesh. It would be our pleasure. Chapter 935. After Gilgamesh finished speaking, he walked down from the throne and walked straight to the door. Hurry up and catch up. This king won't be responsible if you fall behind. Let's go. Wuming patted Gadotsi and Matthew's shoulders and smiled. Don't be fooled by Gil's words. If we really don't catch up, he won't care about us. Even if it was Wuming, the result would be the same. Gilgamesh was a man of his words. Isn't that bad? Matthew had a new understanding of King Gilgamesh's willfulness. But Gil will definitely slow down and pretend to wait for us. He has changed from the arrogant hero king to the existence sitting on the throne of the king of men. Gilgamesh is now a veritable sage king. Wuming praised Gilgamesh in a disguised way. Idiot, don't talk too much. Hurry up and catch up. This king won't slow down. Yes. We'll catch up. Gadotsi and Matthew ran toward the exit in a panic. Wuming smiled helplessly, shrugged his shoulders and followed. Just like that, the last person left the throne room. The empty throne room was illuminated by the rays of the setting sun, making it look exceptionally beautiful. Gilgamesh walked out of the tower, but he didn't go directly to the main road. Instead, he went around to the back of the tower and gently pressed somewhere at the bottom of the tower. A stone wall protruded and slowly rose like a stone door. A dim passage appeared in front of Gilgamesh. Without the slightest hesitation, Gilgamesh stepped inside. However, Gadotsi and Matthew, who followed Gilgamesh, were a little confused. They had been in Uruk for a while, but it was the first time they saw such a place. Was it an important institution? Although Gadotsi and Matthew didn't recognize it, Wuming recognized it. I see. No wonder you didn't see Zhuge Kongming. He's probably here, Wuming explained as he walked behind Gadotsi and Matthew. In here. The two were stunned when they heard Wuming's words. So there was such a secret room in Mesopotamia. However, this isn't a secret room. How do I explain this? Anyway, You'll know when you go in. Wuming spread his hands and walked to the stone door that was still open. By the way, this is the passage to the place where I used to live, Wuming said as he pointed to the passage behind the stone door. The passage to the place where you used to live. The two were a little confused. I'll explain as we walk. The stone door will automatically close if we delay for too long, Wuming said as he walked into the passage. Oh, it's semi-automatic. Godatsi sighed. At that moment, the stone door made a sound of friction and swayed as it fell. It looked like it was about to close. Say, Senior. The stone door seems to be closing. Matthew was shocked. If this continued, they would probably be locked outside. Senior, I'm sorry, Matthew exclaimed as he grabbed Godatsi's arm and ran toward the stone door. While Matthew slowed down, Matthew changed from holding Godatsi with one hand to holding Godatsi in his arms. He walked briskly to the half-closed stone door. With inertia, Matthew held Godatsi and slid into the half-closed stone door. Then the stone door happened to close completely. Great, Senior, we're in. Matthew first took a deep breath, then looked at Godatsi in his arms. However, Godatsi's state at the moment was very similar to the feeling of being squeezed by Matthew's chest. She looked a little dizzy. Say, Senior. Are you okay? Matthew grabbed Godatsi's shoulder and shook desperately. Godatsi immediately pressed Matthew's hand. I'm fine, Matthew, just a little dizzy. If Matthew continued to shake, it would not be as simple as dizziness. At this time, the passage that was dim because of the closed stone door suddenly lit up. Sorry. Actually, I closed the stone door and startled you. After all, it was a passage leading to his former residence. The method of opening and closing was naturally in the hands of Wuming. The dragon horn on Wuming's head emitted a white light that was not dazzling, which was just enough to illuminate the surroundings. Godatsi and Matthew both looked at Wuming silently, or rather, they stared at him and made an ambiguous sound. Wuming realized that his joke might have gone too far, and his face became serious. Ahem. I'm just urging you to hurry up. Okay, let's go. Gil is in front, we can't delay for too long. As Wuming said, he turned around with a face full of shame, and began to walk down the passage. Godatsi and Matthew were not that angry, so they followed Wuming closely. In order to divert their attention, Wuming began to talk about the origin of this passage. When I first came to the Uruk was still ruled by King Lugarbanda. As the god who protected the Uruk, I hid in a cave. I basically walked around with the dolls I made, or observed the entire Uruk through the statues in my temple. This passage leads to the cave where I hid. Villo-senpai, why did you hide? Matthew was quite puzzled. The gods' generation was an era where humans and gods coexisted. It was reasonable to say that there was no need to hide. Also, even if you wanted to hide, why did you choose to hide in a cave? You were the god of Sumer at that time, right? This sentence was transmitted from Godatsi's wristband, which was Roman speech in Chaldea. The reason I needed to hide was very simple. It was because I was injured at that time. As for why I hid in a cave, it was simply because I had no place to go. Although the first half of Wuming's sentence aroused everyone's curiosity, they could still understand it. However, the second half of the sentence attracted everyone's attention and puzzlement. No place to go? Godatsi and Matthew did not understand what he meant. However, Roman, who was sitting in Chaldea's control room, seemed to have guessed something. He looked at Leonardo da Vinci beside him in disbelief, as if asking for confirmation. The genius Leonardo da Vinci naturally understood Roman's meaning and nodded, indicating that Roman should continue. That, the reason why there was no place to go, could it be that you are a foreign god? Chapter 936. A foreign god? Godatsi paused for a moment. What did this mean? Doctor, are you saying that the Villo Senior is not Sumer's native god? Wuming was not surprised by Roman's conjecture. After all, he did not intend to hide his identity as a foreign god. Let's not talk about anything else. Just the fact that he has multiple identities in history proves that the Villo is not a simple existence. At the very least, he is not a native god. Sumer's native gods were born from faith. After the gods retreated, these gods also disappeared. Only Wu Ming, who was not a native god, could survive in other eras. Of course, it was only a possibility that he could survive in other eras. However, Wu Ming had left his shadow in many places in history. Cyrus, Sodric, Cyrus Ed, Hyenryong. Even if he was a foreign god, once he accepted the natives' faith, it would still have a serious impact after the gods disappeared. However, Wu Ming acted as if nothing had happened and left traces in human history. Roman guessed that Wu Ming's traces probably existed in the modern era as well. It was just that they had not been discovered. After all, Wu Ming had personally admitted that he was not dead. That's right. Roman's analysis is correct. I am actually a foreign god. Wu Ming admitted it naturally. You really are a foreign god. Gudatsi thought it was a joke. Because I protected the Uruk, the humans of the Uruk and even Mesopotamia classified me as a Sumer god. Even so, the disappearance of the gods will not have much impact on me. When Wu Ming's power was insufficient in the past, he was restricted when he used his real body in the modern era. He had to be careful. However, now Wu Ming did not have to be careful at all. This was because Wu Ming's status had reached the limit of the world. The world could no longer restrict Wu Ming. After all, Wu Ming was one step away from adulthood. However, this step could no longer rely on the accumulation of time. He had to find another way. Will Tachika hate me because I am a foreign god? Wu Ming suddenly turned around and looked at Gudatsi. However, this immediately received a response from Gudazi. How is that possible? Assassin is assassin. Is she a god or a human? Or does she have anything to do with a foreign god or a local god? Anyway, I've always liked assassin. Gudatsi had a baffled look on his face. However, Gudatsi's words stunned the innocent Matthew. His face couldn't help but blush. That. Senior, are you confessing to Senior Villo? Matthew asked embarrassedly. Wu Ming was also stunned. He felt that Gudatsi's love for him was not the kind of love between a man and a woman. It was more like the love between a brother and a sister. It's not a confession. If I have to say it, I feel that assassin is like a brother to me. Simply put, it's the love between a brother and a sister. Gudatsi also explained in a serious tone. Sure enough, Tachika, you think so too. Wu Ming sighed in relief. If he treated Gudatsi as a sister, and Gudatsi treated him as a love interest, wouldn't it be strange? Of course. Anyway, I don't know why, but I always feel close to assassin. This was the same for Wu Ming. Although the two had only met a few times, ever since Wu Ming met Gudatsi for the first time, he felt that Gudatsi was like a sister to him. He wanted to take care of her. Although Wu Ming didn't understand the reason, it didn't hinder the feelings between Wu Ming and Gudatsi. Gudatsi said with a smile. Then, she threw herself into Wu Ming's arms. The space in this passage isn't that big. Why are you making a fuss? Can't you be more obedient? Wu Ming's face was full of helplessness. Gudatsi responded to Wu Ming with a proud laugh. Hee, I won't. Seeing this scene, Matthew said with a blank face. Doctor, I'm a bit confused. As a follower and junior who accompanied Gudatsi all the way, Matthew could be said to be the one who understood Gudatsi the most. Senior Varen and Senior Varen aren't siblings, and their feelings for each other are beyond the brotherly love I've seen. But the way they look at each other doesn't seem to be the love between a man and a woman. I don't quite understand this kind of feeling. However, the doctor didn't respond. Doctor? Chaldea had to speak through Gudatsi's bracelet, but Chaldea didn't need to be close to receive the sound. It was precisely because of this that Gudatsi also realized that something was wrong. After leaving Wu Ming's arms, Gudatsi called Chaldea. Doctor? Doctor? However, there was still no response. Is the signal interfered again? Gudatsi couldn't help but guess. After all, the signal between the bracelet and Chaldea was often easily interfered with. This was also a drawback that Chaldea couldn't eliminate. It shouldn't be. Although my cave does have a barrier, it can't be interfered with before I get close. Wu Ming also made a judgment. However, at this moment, Gudatsi's bracelet finally made a sound, but it was Leonardo da Vinci's bracelet. Yes, this is your genius Leonardo da Vinci's bracelet. Student Romani has died in battle, and he was muttering. It's more than brotherly love, But it's not love between a man and a woman. I don't understand such feelings. Damn it, I'm such a loser without family, friends, and lovers. Oh, by the way, Romani was crying. As a genius, Leonardo da Vinci could imitate him, but for the sake of this genius image I refused. So the doctor is such a loser. Gadazzi couldn't help but laugh dryly. I thought the doctor was married. Matthew, who had seen Roman wearing a ring, didn't know what to say. Roman, I won't talk about you for now, but to Chica, Matthew, Leonardo da Vinci, and the other surviving members of Chaldea, aren't they all your friends and family? You've been through life and death together, and you've been working hard to save the world. This is a situation where one wrong move will cause you to lose the whole game. Isn't that enough to prove this relationship? Although the saying, "a friend in need is a friend indeed," seemed a little cliché, the meaning it expressed was not a cliché. No matter when, a friend in need could indeed reveal a friend in need, and Chaldea was currently doing so. After Wu Ming said this, Gadazzi, Matthew, and the rest of Chaldea fell into silence. Chapter 937. What's wrong? Wu Ming saw that everyone was silent, and for a moment he was puzzled. Did he say something wrong? Villo-senpai, you're right. Matthew showed a relieved smile. That's right, everyone worked together to get through so many singularities. Without everyone, Matthew and I definitely wouldn't be able to do it. Gadazzi also said. It seems that even a genius like me can be slow. It seemed that Wu Ming was better than Leonardo da Vinci in some aspect. And Leonardo da Vinci's voice sounded quite distressed. And Chaldea's staff also started to discuss because of this sentence. Yes, because I've been nervous all this time. I've forgotten that we're partners who have gone through so many difficulties together. Indeed, although we're facing a world crisis, the relationship between everyone has become more intimate. That's right, to be able to go through the end of the world with everyone, whether we succeed or not, we've already become friends. What nonsense are you talking about? We'll definitely succeed. That's right, Fujimaru and Gillett have gone through so many singularities, we'll definitely succeed. But we can't slack off. Only by doing our job can we be worthy of Fujimaru and Gillett's efforts. Oh. Everyone exchanged words one after another. And although they were chatting happily, the staff still didn't forget their work at hand, and even their morale rose for some reason. For a time, Chaldea's control room was still operating normally, but no matter how one looked at it, it was livelier, more lively, and more hopeful than before. And Roman, who was squatting and crying on the side, also recovered and walked to Leonardo da Vinci's side. At this time, Leonardo da Vinci also took the initiative to let Roman sit down. After adjusting his mentality, Roman spoke. I can only say that you're worthy of being a historical hero and Lord God. You're more open-minded than us humans. Because of the impact of the burning of humanity, our nerves are indeed a little tense. In the end, Roman let out a long sigh and thanked Wu Ming sincerely. Thank you. Whether it was Leonardo da Vinci, Gadazzi, or Matthew, all of them could tell that Roman was very grateful to Wu Ming. Although it's not as serious as you make it out to be, you guys have indeed neglected it. Of course, Roman, if I had met you earlier, I think we would have definitely become friends. If that was the case, it would be hard to say if the current Roman would really have a fever. Whether or not Wu Ming could change the past Roman was another matter altogether. I think you can probably change me. For some reason, Roman seemed to be recalling something and fell into deep thought. Forget it, let's talk about these things later. We have to hurry up and catch up with Gil. Don't let him wait too long. Even if he's not called a wise king, the king's temper is also erratic. Wu Ming's words surprised Gadazzi and Matthew. That's true. Matthew nodded. Yes, let's go quickly. I don't want to experience any more tests. It seems that Gadazzi's memory of the trial given by Gilgamesh was still fresh in her mind. Even if Gadazzi's view of the current Gilgamesh had changed, there was still a fear of Gilgamesh in her heart. Sure enough, when Gadazzi, Wu Ming, and Matthew caught up with Gilgamesh, Gadazzi's throat moved, and a nervous look appeared on her face. Gilgamesh, who was standing steadily in the middle of the passage with his back facing Wu Ming's trio, crossed his arms in front of his chest, and only spoke when he heard the movements of Wu Ming's trio. Idiot. Too slow. This king is still waiting for you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, King Gilgamesh. Gadotsi and Matthew were obviously frightened, but Wuming seemed to have seen through something, and a teasing smile appeared on his face. Ahem. Gil, if I remember correctly, there should be a fork in the road ahead. Although it was a very normal sentence, Wuming's tone gave people the feeling that he was teasing Gilgamesh. However, the response to Wuming was Gilgamesh's arrogant voice. Humph. You don't have to deliberately provoke this king. Even if this king will work himself to death, he will not be senile. It's just that our destination this time is not the cave where you are hiding, but another place. This king is afraid that you will take Fumaru and the others the wrong way, so he specially waited for you here. Yes, this road was not a one-way road. There would be many forks in the road ahead. The extra roads were deliberately made by Wuming. In short, in order to make the right way to the cave where he was hiding not easily discovered, it was specially made under the Divine Tower, but it was useless. How could people who had the ability to find the stone door and come and be confused by these forks? If they could come in, if they were instructed by Wuming, they would naturally not go the wrong way, and if they came in with their own ability, it meant that the other party was a capable person, and naturally, they would not go the wrong way. Not to mention those who couldn't come in. These forks had no effect on them since they couldn't even come in. As for those who came in by mistake, no one would come in by mistake. Wuming would not make such a typical mistake. The stone door itself was set by Wuming to disperse the loon. Ordinary people couldn't even get close to it, let alone open the mechanism to enter the passage by chance. Therefore, these forks became superfluous. When these forks were made, the young Gilgamesh also persuaded Wuming not to do these useless things, but according to Wuming's words, there must be forks in the tunnel, and other people's secret passages are like this. In the end, Gilgamesh couldn't resist Wuming, so he let Wuming complete the passage mixed with forks. As a result, this place was like a maze. Regardless of whether he got lost or not, he was definitely annoyed. Wuming didn't expect Gilgamesh to forget the way. After all, Gilgamesh must have been here in the past 3 months. Just like Gilgamesh said, he wouldn't forget the way even if he worked himself to death. Wuming teased Gilgamesh mainly to liven up the atmosphere so that Gadotsi and Matthew wouldn't be so nervous. After this king's Uruk was attacked by the magical beasts last time, this king accidentally discovered an extra passage that you set up underground. So this king took advantage of the situation and dug a new space at the end of this passage to meet the requirements of this king's military advisor. Chapter 938. Gilgamesh said as he walked. Gilgamesh walked in front, illuminated by the light emitted by the dragon horn headdress on Wuming's head. His long shadow spread out on the special stone floor in front of him, creating a clear shadow. In fact, Gilgamesh could see clearly in the dark passage even if there was no light, and so could Wuming, so there was no light in this passage. Today, because Gadotsi and Matthew followed, Wuming asked Kalas to light up the passage. He had to say that Kalas was really omnipotent in terms of support. Wuming didn't know whether Matthew could see clearly, but Wuming knew that Gadotsi, as an ordinary person, needed light. Without delay, Wuming followed Gilgamesh, and then asked Gilgamesh. Speaking of which, your military counselor is a pseudo-follower. Is his personality Zhuge Kongming, or the physical personality? Or is it like Ishtar's 3:7? Taking this opportunity, he could ask Gilgamesh the truth, and Gadotsi and Matthew were also quite interested in this. Oh, it seems that you have seen this king's military counselor before. We met him in Winterwood in Rome, but at that time, one was Zhuge Kongming, and the other was the physical personality Ermero too. Without Wuming, Gadotsi and Matthew met Ermero too, who acted as a king's military counselor, when they followed the 5th emperor of Rome, Nero, to fight against the enemy. This king's military counselor is Zhuge Kongming, not the physical personality Ermero too you have seen. After Gilgamesh finished answering, Wuming spoke again. So what does this Zhuge Kongming need? Is it an independent secret space? Then the cave I used to hide in is not impossible. Why spend the effort to build another one? Wuming was quite puzzled. He needs an enclosed space where no one can disturb him to make his props. And your cave has a ventilation, so this king created such a space for him. Probably because he died in a tent with airflow when he was alive, Zhuge Kongming, who became a heroic spirit, was quite concerned about the enclosed space without airflow, especially the kind of enclosed space underground, which made Zhuge Kongming quite satisfied. Furthermore, the cave you once hid in belongs to you. This king will forever guard it for you. This king will not allow anyone to use it. This point is off the table. On this point, Gilgamesh still has his own insistence. Wuming naturally knew what Gilgamesh cared about. For Gilgamesh, the place where Wuming lived probably has a special meaning to Gilgamesh. Speaking of which, what's at the end of this path? It's just a dead end, there's nothing. Because of this, Gilgamesh built a new secret room at the end of this path. Is your memory getting bad because of your age? How can you forget something you did? Gilgamesh couldn't help but criticize Wuming. There's nothing I can do about it. I was just playing with it back then. Wuming turned his head to the side awkwardly. Speaking of which, what's at the end of the other paths? Are they also dead ends? Gadatsi was suddenly curious. They're all dead ends. Gilgamesh very simply and crudely replied. Indeed, Gil is right, they're all dead ends. However, Wuming added in his heart as if he was complaining. It was indeed a dead end. Other than the dead ends of the other paths, there were all kinds of runes such as curse flames, thunderbolts, and so on. Furthermore, they were all so dangerous that one would die if they were not careful. Basically, it was the kind of dead end that made it impossible to survive. Looking at Gadatsi's sudden realization, Wuming was sure that the dead end imagined by Gadatsi and the dead end mentioned by Gilgamesh were definitely not the same thing. Castor needs a magic workshop to make items. Mr. Kongming probably needs to build his own workshop, so he asked King Gilgamesh to help him build it. Matthew suddenly interjected. Exactly. Gilgamesh praised Matthew, which made Matthew a little proud. However, Wuming was not like Matthew who didn't know anything. Although Castor needs a magic workshop, the magic cast by Chinese heroes should be fundamentally different from the magic cast by other regions. Even if there is no workshop, Chinese servants can still exert their power. Although Wuming didn't know the meaning, Wuming knew that the Chinese caster was not like the magicians in other regions. Not only the method and name were different, but the essence was also different from the magic base used by other magicians. In other words, Chinese magicians didn't use magic base. Not to mention the Kanagi magicians for the time being. The magicians after the Kanagi magicians needed magic base to use magic. Although it seemed that magicians could easily perform magic by chanting a spell or drawing a circle, but magicians could only perform magic by connecting to the magic base of this world. The magic base could be imagined as a collection of a series of knowledge, ideas, and so on, and it basically existed in the land. Of course, if you think about Christianity, a world-famous religion, its magic base might be spread all over the world. Just like the Lune Rune, there was also a magic base when it was used. When Wuming learned the Lune Rune, he was a Kanagi, and Wuming was a mutant, so the magic base naturally couldn't restrict him. So Wuming only knew a little about it and didn't go too deep. The magic circuit was not only used to provide magical power, but it was also used to connect to the magic base. This was the most basic truth in the magic world, and basically, every magician would know it. However, Wuming, who glanced at Gadatsi, silently took back his sentence at this moment. He had to say that Gadatsi was really too bad as a magician, and in terms of temperament, Gadatsi was not suitable to be a magician at all. However, it was exactly because of Gadatsi's temperament that he could keep making connections with the clones of the heroic spirits who had unique personalities and unusual tempers, the servants. In short, although Wuming didn't have a deep understanding of these, Wuming knew that the magic used by the Chinese magicians was very different from the magic used in other places. So Wuming pointed out that Zhuge Kongming didn't need a magic workshop. Moreover, as the military advisor on the battlefield, Zhuge Kongming must have spent most of his time marching and fighting. Since that's the case, it's not surprising that he has a way to replace the workshop. Now that the magical beasts are wreaking havoc, I don't think that the military advisor needs a special workshop to make items. Wuming's eyes flashed with the light of speculation, although he looked at Gilgamesh. I'm afraid, Gil, you gave him some task. Chapter 939. What task was given? Looking at each other, Gadotsi and Matthew couldn't help but repeat. As expected of this king's teacher, Uruk Hyenryong, that's right. As you said, this king's military counselor doesn't need a special workshop. The reason why the military counselor needs a workshop is indeed because this king gave Zhuge Kongming a difficult task. Gilgamesh stopped abruptly as he finished speaking. We're here. Ha. So fast. Matthew showed a look of disbelief. They just walked for a short while. How did they arrive? With such a short distance, if they were on the ground, it was almost the market near the Holy Tower in Uruk City. No, Matthew, since you stepped into this fork, your speed has increased several times, but you didn't notice it. Roman saw it clearly through the instrument in Chaldea. The figures of Gadotsi and the others seemed to be moving forward at a high speed. It can be said that they were completely out of Uruk City. According to the instrument, your current position is somewhere near the north wall. Roman shouted in disbelief. How is that possible? We only walked a few steps? Gadotsi was also surprised. Is the instrument broken? What's going on? Oh, so annoying. Roman checked the instrument. But King Gilgamesh also said that we have arrived. Maybe we are really near the north wall. Matthew raised his small hand and expressed his opinion. So that's how it is. Roman stopped checking the equipment and nodded. I think it's probably some kind of magic trick with special effects set up in this underground passage. Since this was Kanzaki's underground labyrinth-like tunnel, the entire tunnel was filled with mana. That was why Roman didn't pay much attention to this mana. Now that he thought about it, it was highly likely that the mana was being emitted by some sort of special magic spell. At the very least, it was related. Roman's judgment is correct. This passage has an acceleration effect. Wuming gave the final answer. However, this was not set by Wuming. It was probably added by Gilgamesh later. Of course, don't forget that this king is now a magician. It's natural for him to use magic to make the passage more convenient. This place was quite a distance away from Uruk. If they were to rely on walking, they would not be able to reach their destination in a short period of time. Only by applying the acceleration effect to the entire passage could they reach their destination in such a short period of time. It only takes such a short time to go from Uruk to the north wall. This is a great advantage for the north wall. Matthew realized the problem. In a sense, this passage shortened the distance between the north wall and Uruk to the extreme. In this way, whether it was support, marching, retreating, or other things, it could be done easily. This passage originally led to the north, and its end was near the north wall. In the beginning, when Mu Xiao and Hu Xiao, one of the commanders of the demonic beasts, led the demonic beasts to sneak into the Uruk from underground, they also found this passage by accident and smoothly arrived near the Uruk. If not for this, the demonic beasts wouldn't have reached the Uruk that night. However, there were two sides to everything. Since the demonic beasts could use this passage to reach the Uruk, why couldn't humans use it? Gilgamesh simply transformed the end of the passage into Zhuge Kongming's magic workshop, which was connected to the barracks in the north wall. If there were no limitations, it would indeed be more convenient to support the north wall from Uruk. The limitation was the narrowness of the passage. Kalas analyze it. Wuming put his hand on the wall and passed the magic to Kalas to achieve the effect of sampling. Master, the space here is too narrow. The magic attached to it can only work on a dozen people at most. If more people are added, I'm afraid it will exceed the capacity of the acceleration, magic, and the acceleration will be scrapped. Kala's cold voice came from Wuming's head. It could be said that it scared Gadotsi and Matthew. Senior Villow's horn. Matthew was stunned. Talk. Gadotsi raised her finger and pointed at Wuming's head in surprise. By the way, Kalas didn't talk to you, but you have seen Kalas before. Wuming's words made Gadotsi fall into deep thought. Have we seen her before? In addition to this peculiarity, Gadotsi couldn't remember when Wuming had a horn on his head. When we first met, the black hat I was wearing was actually another form of Kalas. After hearing Wuming's words, Gadotsi suddenly recalled the first time she and Wuming met. That memory was still fresh in Gadotsi's mind. So it's that black hat. Gudatsi suddenly shouted, as if she had just woken up from a dream. Senpai, you are too rude. Mashu was a little embarrassed as she poked Gudatsi, who realized that she was indeed a little rude, scratched the back of her head. Hey, I'm sorry. However, Collis didn't pay attention to Gudatsi and Matthew at all. It was precisely because Collis didn't talk to anyone other than Wuming that Gudatsi and Matthew didn't remember Collis. Oh, it turned out to be a high-level magic costume. When did you get this? This king doesn't have any impression of it. Gilgamesh saw the nature of Collis at a glance. When he saw the dragon horn on Wuming's head, Gilgamesh knew that it was a magic costume, but Gilgamesh didn't expect Wuming's magic costume to be so intelligent. It was definitely a high-level magic costume. Collis was made by the second magician in the future. Although it is a simple auxiliary magic costume, Collis is almost omnipotent except for combat. What? The second magician made it? This time it was Roman's turn to be surprised. Sure enough, Roman should have thought of this earlier. An attire that was similar to an artificial intelligence and could instantly analyze the magic within the passage was undoubtedly the highest level of magic attire. Perhaps only an existence at the level of a mage would be able to create something like this. However, before Roman could recover from his shock, a voice that was supposed to be very pleasant to the ear emitted a strong fighting spirit at this moment. Oh, I seem to have heard someone mention omnipotence. Chapter 940. It's Leonardo da Vinci's voice. However, Matthew's words were full of worry. After all, although Leonardo da Vinci's voice was still pleasant to the ears, when Leonardo da Vinci's voice entered Matthew's ears, Matthew had a bad feeling. It's probably Leonardo da Vinci's jealousy again. It's not the first time. Gudatsi whispered to Matthew. After spending so many days together from Winterwood to Mesopotamia, Gudatsi understood Leonardo da Vinci. Whenever other people involved Leonardo da Vinci's expertise, Leonardo da Vinci would become unusually unique. For example, Wuming's omnipotence just now. For Leonardo da Vinci, who had the title of omnipotent, this could be said to be a blatant provocation, and it was a top-notch provocation. Leonardo da Vinci was talented in painting, music, sculpting, mathematics, astronomy, geometry, biology, physics, engineering, invention of props, creation of weapons, and many other fields. Furthermore, he had outstanding achievements in all of them. Furthermore, such an omnipotent person had quite a bit of talent in magic as well. If someone provoked Leonardo da Vinci in the aspect of counterfeiting, then Leonardo da Vinci would discuss with the other party on who is the real product. If someone provoked Leonardo da Vinci in the aspect of art, then Leonardo da Vinci would discuss with the other party on who is the real artist. If someone provoked Leonardo da Vinci in the aspect of invention and construction, then Leonardo da Vinci would discuss with the other party on who is the real inventor. Although it seemed like he was going to use violence, Leonardo da Vinci was against violence. However, if he accidentally used violence, Leonardo da Vinci would not reflect on it. Wuming's words just now included all these aspects, which could be said to be an unprecedented provocation for Leonardo da Vinci. Omnipotence. This word could be said to be synonymous with Leonardo da Vinci. Not only Leonardo da Vinci himself, but also many scholars and followers who knew Leonardo da Vinci in history recognized him. The personnel of Chaldea often sighed with emotion about Leonardo da Vinci's omnipotence, saying that other existences were omnipotents in front of such a person. Wasn't that a provocation to Leonardo da Vinci? Although Wuming didn't mean it, the speaker didn't mean it, but the listener did. It could only be said that this really confirmed Leonardo da Vinci's words. Be careful of artist followers, because artist followers were often some lunatics. Duh. Leonardo da Vinci. Calm down, please. The magic you emit has already affected the safety of the individual of our opposing incense, has been completely detected. Communication is also interfered with. Please restrain yourself. Indeed, Wuming's side did start to become noisy when he heard Chaldea's words. Leonardo da Vinci's kiss seems to be serious. It's over. I hope the doctor can stop Leonardo da Vinci from kissing. Matthew and Gadotsi began to pray meaninglessly. Wuming couldn't help but feel nervous at this moment. It was reasonable to say that he didn't have to be afraid of Leonardo da Vinci at all. But strangely, at this moment, Wuming didn't know why he felt a trace of fear. This was probably the uniqueness of artist followers, to be able to make Wuming feel afraid. However, in the next second, the sound of something breaking suddenly came from Gadotsi's bracelet. Beep. That was the sound of the communication being cut off. The communication was cut off. Gadotsi and Matthew were curious. It shouldn't be that weak, right? Could it be that Roman did something? However, Wuming looked at Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh's claw-gloved hand was still pointing at Gadotsi's direction. There was a trace of magic on the tip of the claw-glove's index finger. Apparently, Gilgamesh helped to cut off the communication between Chaldea and this side. This king just felt that the genius over at Chaldea's side is a little too noisy, and we are about to enter another magician's workshop. If the other party asks, just use this as an excuse. Most magicians' workshops did have the function of blocking other magic methods. This made Gadotsi and Matthew, who knew Leonardo da Vinci, brighten up when they heard Gilgamesh's words. As expected of King Gilgamesh, who can deal with so many desperate government affairs. Gadotsi thought of Gilgamesh's efficiency in dealing with government affairs not long ago. No matter what, he could easily get things done. As expected of King Gilgamesh? He actually found a solution so easily. Matthew looked at Gilgamesh with admiration. As long as Leonardo da Vinci calmed down and explained the reason with a proper reason, this matter would basically be over. A calm Leonardo da Vinci was a very reliable and approachable follower. You too, praise this king to your heart's content, ha ha ha. Probably satisfied that he solved the upcoming disaster. In an instant, Gilgamesh laughed heartily. Yes, King Gilgamesh. As if encouraged, Gadotsi and Matthew let out an amazing shout. Then Wuming made a little joke. Henryong, this king solved this problem for you. You should thank this king. Gilgamesh looked at Wuming happily. However, how could Wuming let Gilgamesh succeed? This is underground, I don't dare to shout. What if it collapses? This scared Gadotsi and Matthew, and they immediately shut their mouths. However, Gilgamesh still had a way to crack Wuming's trick. Humph. This place has been magically processed. How can it collapse because of a mere shout? It's simply an alarmist. Immediately afterward, Gilgamesh looked at Wuming, or rather, he glared at Wuming. What's more, this is a shout of praise for this king. How can it stop? Stupid. As if he was dissatisfied with Wuming for causing Gadotsi and Matthew's voices to disappear, he burst out swearing. Yes, yes, my king, but shouldn't we get down to business? Wuming smiled helplessly at Gilgamesh. What are they here for? Your remonstrance is reasonable. This king won't fuss over your mistake. Let's go. This strategist's workshop is just a turn ahead. Gilgamesh said as he led the way. Really? Wuming shook his head helplessly, then followed Gilgamesh. At this moment, Wuming missed the past. Chapter 941. In the past, Gilgamesh often quarreled with Wuming like this. However, every time Enkidu acted as the middleman, Gilgamesh and Wuming would be fine in an instant. From an outsider's point of view, they might think that Wuming and Gilgamesh were quarreling. However, the two of them only looked fierce on the surface. In fact, they didn't seem to be quarreling at all. After growing up, Gilgamesh would call everyone bastard whenever he saw them. Although he wouldn't call Enkidu and Wuming that way, sometimes Gilgamesh's temper was so bad that even Wuming couldn't bear it. Enkidu would definitely persuade Gilgamesh with reason and emotion, in a gentle manner, but Wuming would definitely not be so gentle. As a result, there was the seemingly quarrelsome conversation just now. Over time, it became a way of saying things between the two of them. It could also be considered as a way to vent their feelings. Therefore, from the outside, Wuming and Gilgamesh, who seemed to be quarreling, were actually just having a normal conversation. Gilgamesh was clearly not angry. He was just indulging his feelings in front of his friends, family, and teacher, which led to the appearance of quarreling. Losing his temper to outsiders was out of anger, but losing his temper to his family was simply because the other party was his family. Moreover, it wasn't called losing his temper. In short, there was no need to have any concerns because to Gilgamesh, Wuming was his family. Although as a king he didn't need to care about other people's feelings and could do whatever he wanted as a tyrant, there was even less of a need to hide it when facing his family. Especially after sitting on the throne of the Sage King and becoming the true king of people, Gilgamesh hadn't experienced something like this for a long time. After all, compared to himself when he was young, as the Sage King, Gilgamesh's words would not be refuted at all, because the Sage King's words were very correct. Compared to when Gilgamesh was young, there were still a few arrogant guys who kept remonstrating him. Now in the Uruk imperial court, there were no unnecessary voices. After all, the Sage King's words were right. Naturally, no one would ask for a rebuke. However, no matter what time it was, Gilgamesh always lacked a family member who could bicker with him, a family member who could objectively communicate with him regardless of whether he was right or wrong. Enkidu's personality was too gentle, so it was impossible. Only Wuming could fulfill this role. He was not only Gilgamesh's teacher, but also an existence similar to his adoptive father. Moreover, his thinking was quite avant-garde. More importantly, Gilgamesh couldn't defeat or subdue him. Gilgamesh couldn't fight with Wuming by risking his life and perishing together. Over time, this became the way Wuming and Gilgamesh talked to each other. Unfortunately, they still had business to attend to at the moment. Otherwise, Wuming wouldn't have minded talking to Gilgamesh for a while. Anyway, Enkidu was in the form of part of Wuming's spiritual base, and when Enkidu appeared, Gilgamesh would definitely be shocked to the extent that his face would change color. At the thought of this, Wuming's face showed a wicked smile. However, Wuming also thought of one of the demonic beast's commanders, the person who pretended to be Enkidu. This was also a world that he had to deal with personally. However, it was better to deal with the matter at hand first. When everyone turned the corner, they saw a door with a special formation engraved on it. The door completely blocked the road in front of them without any gaps. It looked like it grew naturally here. When Wuming saw this stone door, he felt an unknown magic power enveloping him. "Senior, do you feel it?" Matthew and Gadatsi whispered. "Yes, I feel it." Gadatsi nodded. "We've probably entered the range of the other party's noble artifact." Wuming wanted to take a step forward, facing the magic power emitted by the door in front of him, and walked to the front of the door. It was a circle formed by two large black and white fish intertwined with each other. There were 8 patterns that were very similar but had obvious differences in details. This was the formation engraved on the door. 8 trigrams. This is probably Zhuge Kongming's best formation. Stone Soldier 8 formation. Back at the Winterwood Singularity, Zhuge Kongming wanted to use the Stone Soldier 8 formation on Attila the Hun in an attempt to delay the other party and give Gadatsi and the others a chance to escape. However, Zhuge Kongming's Stone Soldier 8 formation had just been used, and it was countered by Sima Yi's Mixed Elements array that was specially designed to deal with Zhuge Kongming. Wuming finally witnessed the power of the Stone Soldier 8 formation here today. "Call us." At Wuming's command, the glowing dragon horn on Wuming's head, which was Kalas, suddenly expanded the light, and then immediately weakened. The light released by Kalas was used for scanning, and the light that expanded just now was like radiation, instantly scanning the surrounding area with this place as the center. "Master, everything underground within the largest range that I can scan is covered by an invisible magic power. Due to the uniqueness of the other party's noble artifact, if you're not close to here, you won't be able to sense the existence of this special magic power at all. Probably due to the uniqueness of the other party's noble artifact, although the range of the magic power was extremely wide, if one was not close to the source, one would not be able to sense it at all. Moreover, the entire underground area that was beyond Kalas's scanning range was covered. This is Zhuge Kongming's countermeasure to prevent the Uruk from being attacked by monsters from underground again." Wuming looked at Gilgamesh as he spoke. However, Gilgamesh did not answer Wuming directly. This king was having a headache about how to prevent the next underground attack from monsters. This king's military advisor has done this king a huge favor. Since there was a first time, there would definitely be a second time. Gilgamesh would not expect monsters to be like humans, who would give up after failing the first time. The safety of the Uruk could not be taken lightly by gambling. Coincidentally, Zhuge Kongming's noble artifact could prevent the enemy from invading. It could be used as the underground defense that gave Gilgamesh a headache. However, there was a price to pay. In order to cover the entire underground area, the expanded range of the Stone Soldier 8 formation could only be used underground, and the parts above ground could not be taken care of at all. Even so, almost the entire underground area that extended from the north wall to the Uruk was locked by Zhuge Kongming's noble artifact. Once monsters sneaked into the range of the Stone Soldier 8 formation from underground, they would immediately lose their direction and eventually return to the starting point. It was impossible for them to dig deeper and sneak into the Uruk to attack, because if they were to dig deeper, they would dig into Ereshkigal's mansion of the dead. Chapter 942. After paying the price of causing many monsters to die in the underworld, the monster commanders gave up on the idea of attacking the Uruk from underground. They had no choice. When the monster commanders tried to dig deeper into the ground where the 8 stone formations could not cover, they would reach the underworld if they dug a little deeper. There was no way around it. Although Ereshkigal's return did not bring the underworld from the entire Mesopotamia region, and some places could still be dug very deep, the idea of digging from the bottom to bypass the 8 stone formations was really unrealistic. After all, it was too deep, and it would take a lot of time and effort. Therefore, avoiding the underworld and bypassing the 8 stone formations from underground was really difficult for the monsters. Therefore, the monster commanders no longer tried to bypass the Uruk from underground. Setting up Zhuge Kongming's workshop underground and letting Zhuge Kongming use the noble phantasm was actually a defensive measure set up by Gilgamesh for the underground. This was a blatant scheme. With the noble phantasm covering the underground, the monsters could only go around or give up on attacking the Uruk from underground. However, the efficiency of going around the Uruk was too low. It was better to attack the Uruk directly from the north. At the very least, they could wait for the monsters to increase in numbers and let them attack from all directions. No matter how hard it was more practical than going around the Uruk from underground. Therefore, the monster commanders changed their minds and prepared to attack the Uruk from all directions. Wuming's first encounter with Ulidim was the vanguard. He went around the mountains to the back of the Uruk and waited for the opportunity to attack the Quetzalcoatl together with the monsters from the north, the mountains in the northeast, and the Persian Gulf in the southeast to take down the Uruk from all directions. At the same time, they could also get rid of the Quetzalcoatl on the surface. At that time, they only needed to focus on the goddess of the underworld. Wuming felt that the monster commanders were a little whimsical, or perhaps they thought too simply of humans and the Quetzalcoatl. The power of the feathered god had been mentioned before. Furthermore, it took a lot of effort for magical beasts to traverse mountains. Only magical beast commanders with unique physiques and abilities superior to mass-produced magical beasts would be able to traverse mountains effortlessly. However, with the command of the demonic beast commander, it wasn't impossible to mass-produce demonic beasts. But if that was the case, the number of demonic beasts would need to be terrifyingly large. Otherwise, how could they attack from all directions? It could only be said that the idea was good, but it was unrealistic. After all, there weren't that many magical beasts. He could only wait. There was no other way. After all, magical beasts also needed to be born. But now, even if there were enough magical beasts, perhaps the magical beast commander's plan to attack the Uruk from all directions couldn't be carried out. After all, whether it was the mass-produced Ulidim, Ujir, or Musamafu, more than half of the demonic beasts had been killed or injured. It was also because of the huge decrease in the number of demonic beasts that the demonic beast commanders in charge of attacking the North Wall had restrained themselves. The frequency of attacks and the number of demonic beasts had decreased, which was why Gilgamesh was able to find time to come here with Wuming, Gadatsi, and Matthew. And not only that, but the number of demonic beast commanders had also decreased from the original 7 to 5. The unknown person who had stolen Enkidu's body, the venomous dragon Basumu, the three-horned lion dragon Ujir, the seven-headed snake Musamafu, and the winged mermaid Kururu. One of the demonic beast commanders, Yulidim, wanted to devour Wuming in the southwest mountain, but was killed by Wuming instead. The other demonic beast commander, Ujir, was also killed by Ereshkigal. Although Musamafu escaped, it was really unpleasant. On the human side, the original 10 servants had been reduced to 11. Although Wuming had drawn Ishtar to his side, she was still the Sumer goddess, the mistress of the sky Ishtar. Moreover, whether it was Wuming or Gilgamesh, what they valued was not Ishtar herself, but the bull of the sky that Ishtar had, Gugurana. Although it was a mythological beast, Gugurana couldn't be defeated by the number of servants, but by the quality of the servants. The unknown person who had stolen Enkidu's body was let go. After all, the other party was using Enkidu's body, and it would be best to capture him alive. The remaining 4 demonic beast commanders didn't need to worry about anything, and the remaining 4 demonic beast commanders were not small. When the time came to deal with these 4 demonic beast commanders, if Ishtar summoned Gugurana and let some servants cooperate with it, eliminating these 4 demonic beast commanders would not be difficult at all. The only thing that needed to be paid attention to was Basuma's poison. Even Gugurana couldn't ignore Basuma's poison. Both sides were at the same level, but it was hard to guarantee that Gugurana would be poisoned. However, if it was Fimbaba, there was probably a chance that it could resist Basuma's poison. As the mythological beast of the forest, Fimbaba was equivalent to the incarnation of nature, and it had a purifying effect. Even if it couldn't completely purify Basuma's poison, it should be able to weaken the poison or resist it. When Wuming left last time, he did let Fimbaba out of Yggdrasil and released it to this singularity. The purpose was to let Fimbaba help to create a wall of vines to protect the North Wall and protect humans. As a result, Wuming didn't know where Fimbaba went. Its master had returned, but it didn't know how to find its master. By the way, Gilgamesh, do you know where Fimbaba went? Wuming suddenly asked Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh frowned. Weren't they talking about the 8 trigrams? Why did they suddenly change the topic? It was impossible for Gilgamesh to know that Wuming was thinking about so many things, but Gilgamesh finally answered Wuming. I don't know. After you left, Fimbaba helped the North Wall construct a wall of vines, and then disappeared. Although the wall of vines in the North Wall has basically been consumed, it is also thanks to Fimbaba's help at that time. Otherwise, this king's Uruk wouldn't know what would have happened. Fimbaba added a layer of vines before the North Wall was completed. Following the vines, the efficiency was much higher. It could be said that without Fimbaba's help, the 11 magical beast commanders, and a large number of enhanced magical beasts that suddenly appeared 3 months ago would have been enough to break the North Wall. I'll go look for it later. After all, Fimbaba can also contribute to dealing with the magical beast commanders. However, Wuming's words attracted Roman's attention. Villo, is the Fimbaba you're talking about the Fimbaba that lives in the fir forest? Wuming wasn't surprised that Roman knew about Fimbaba. After all, if he could be passed down as a god, there was no reason why Fimbaba couldn't. That's right. What's wrong? If we can really find Fimbaba, it can be said to be a great support for us. Chapter 943. According to Sumer's legends, Fimbaba, the divine beast of the forest, had unparalleled power. It even imprisoned the mistress of the sky, Ishtar, leaving the gods helpless. In the end, it was Gilgamesh and Enkidu who worked together with some of the gods to subdue it. It was also because Gilgamesh saved Ishtar that he became involved with Ishtar, which led to the subsequent events of the Bull of the Sky incident. Roman stopped there. After all, it was not appropriate for him to explain the subsequent events in front of Gilgamesh. All in all, if we can find Fimbaba, it will definitely be as useful as the Bull of the Sky, Gugulana. No, it should be said that Fimbaba is indeed stronger than the Bull of the Sky. Is this true, assassin? Is Fimbaba really that strong? Gudatsi, who did not understand this, looked at Wuming, trying to get an answer. Probably. Wuming, who was deep in thought, casually replied. It seemed a little perfunctory. It could not be helped. Wuming's Fimbaba was not the same as the Fimbaba that Roman and the others understood from the legends. Wu-ming's actions in the parallel world were projected to other parallel worlds by the suppression force. In other parallel worlds, Wu-ming's legends and historical stories were modified. This was true, but it was limited to Wu-ming himself. Moreover, the parallel worlds could not completely copy Wu-ming's actions. There would definitely be changes. For example, the Gilgamesh in the parallel world that Wu-ming was in was a woman, but the Gilgamesh in this parallel world was a man. In this way, there would definitely be differences between the two sides. Wu-ming originally thought that the Funbaba in the parallel world would be modified like Wu-ming's Funbaba. However, when Wu-ming heard what Roman said, he instantly understood one thing. The Funbaba in this world and his Funbaba experienced different things. According to Roman, Funbaba imprisoned Ishtar. Then Gilgamesh and Enkidu were asked by the gods to rescue Ishtar, which led to the Bull of the Sky incident. However, Wu-ming's Funbaba did not imprison Ishtar. Moreover, because Funbaba and Wu-ming's holy lance Yggdrasil fused, after being retrieved by Wu-ming, Funbaba basically did not appear in Mesopotamia. The Bull of the Sky incident in Wu-ming's parallel world was only because Ishtar lost her temper, because she thought that she was fooled. Sure enough, Wu-ming was still relying on Ishtar to descend. Anyway, because the Funbaba was retrieved by Wu-ming, Wu-ming did not know the specific strength of Funbaba. Therefore, Wu-ming hesitated when answering Gadatsi. In the end, Wu-ming, who did not think that it would affect anything, chose to end the topic. I'll look for Funbaba later. For now, let's deal with the matter at hand. It was better to wait until they found Funbaba in the future. By the way, how do we get in? Wu-ming looked at Gilgamesh. This door should not be opened with brute force. There should be some kind of mechanism. Logically speaking, this door should have opened when we stood here. Since it didn't open, it's probably because Zhuge Kongming is busy inside. Gilgamesh was not anxious because Zhuge Kongming neglected him because Gilgamesh knew that Zhuge Kongming's task was difficult. At this moment, as if it had heard Gilgamesh's words, the door in front of everyone split from the middle and slowly opened to both sides, revealing darkness. This was probably the so-called camouflage. King Gilgamesh, please forgive me. A familiar voice came from the darkness, followed by the figure of a young man who seemed to be in his 30s coming out of the darkness. The young man's face was the face of Ermero II that Wu-ming had seen before. Zhuge Kongming did indeed use Ermero II's pseudo-follower. Sure enough, it's Ermero II's pseudo-follower. Gadatsi and Matthew whispered to each other. Yes, senpai, I just don't know who is inside this body. Judging from the other party's first sentence just now, it should be Zhuge Kongming without a doubt. Wu-ming also joined the small circle of the two and whispered to each other. If it was Ermero II, it was impossible to talk to Gilgamesh with words like, please forgive me. After all, Ermero II was a modern man, so it should be Zhuge Kongming who was from the ancient era. It's okay. How is the task given to you by this king? I'm doing the final processing, so I neglected you. Please come in and talk. Zhuge Kongming turned sideways and motioned everyone to go in and talk. Gilgamesh took the lead and went in, followed by Wu-ming. When it was Gadatsi and Matthew's turn, Matthew stopped and asked about Zhuge Kongming. Mr. Kongming, do you remember us? Zhuge Kongming shook his head. I don't remember anymore. It seems that you probably met another me somewhere else. Matthew's expression was a little bad, but Matthew wasn't disappointed with the answer. After all, it couldn't be helped. After all, servants were the avatars of heroic spirits. Along the way, they had met many servants that they had met before. However, some of them knew them, and some of them didn't. The most typical example was Leonidas I, who was currently in the North Wall. When they were in the Roman singularity, they encountered Leonidas I as an enemy. However, Leonidas I in the Mesopotamia singularity didn't seem to remember Gadatsi and Matthew. In short, Gadatsi and Matthew were used to it. Let's go in and talk. When the door of the stone formation is open, my noble phantasm will be temporarily ineffective. Although the demonic beasts wouldn't choose to attack from underground, they still had to open the stone formation. What if the demonic beasts used the same trick again? When Matthew and Gadatsi heard this, they both showed a panicked expression, as if they were embarrassed for delaying things. Sorry, let's go in. After Gadotsi smiled awkwardly, she immediately pulled Matthew, who was also smiling awkwardly, and ran into the dark fog. In this regard, Zhuge Kongming smiled rather indifferently. Although the noble phantasm would indeed be ineffective for a while, there was no need to panic. Shaking his head, Zhuge Kongming then walked into the door, and in the next second, the originally split 8 trigrams slowly closed together. Chapter 944. Zhuge Kongming's workshop wasn't as big as imagined, but upon closer inspection, it wasn't small at all. However, Zhuge Kongming's semicircular workshop was quite attractive. The semicircular magic workshop gave people the feeling that the sky was like a bamboo hat, and the ground was like a plate. It was filled with the aura of ancient China, as if they had come from Mesopotamia to ancient China in an instant. The entire workshop's floor was covered with neat green stones, and the domed ceiling was also decorated. There wasn't a trace of soil in sight. It was simply a neat stone room, and it made people's eyes light up. Zhuge Kongming's workshop didn't have much in it, except for a few huge stones and a stone platform in the middle. The huge stones were arranged in a circular pattern in the middle. Upon closer inspection, there were exactly 8 of them, and they were arranged in the shape of the 8 trigrams. In the middle, there was a platform in black and white. On the platform was a strange machine that looked like a modern cannon-shaped weapon, but it was much larger than modern military cannons. The maximum length of the machine was at least 20 meters. Most importantly, this strange machine was so gorgeous that it didn't look like a weapon at all. It looked more like a precious treasure that had been lost to the world. What is this? Gadotsi was shocked. Could this thing that looked like a cannon be some kind of important device? A weapon? Or is this a necessity for Mr. Kongming's workshop? Matthew asked. It was obvious that Gadotsi and Matthew were really interested in this. Taking a closer look at the cannon, the body of the cannon was just a support that could move the barrel up and down. The support supported a long, cannon-like object. The entire cannon barrel could be said to occupy 90% of the entire machine. The current inclination of the barrel was 20 degrees, and it was almost level with the ground. The support under the barrel could be used to adjust the angle of the barrel. Although the support couldn't make the barrel tilt 90 degrees, 67 degrees was not a problem. If it was a weapon, it could be used as a super long-range weapon. At the end of the barrel, there was a round cover that could be opened. The entire barrel gradually became thinner from the back to the front. At the muzzle, there was not a pitch-black hole, but a sharp spike. The spike was as long as 3 meters. It looked like a long spear, and it was quite slender, which made it extremely terrifying. However, when matched with the barrel that was over 20 meters long, the 3-meter muzzle was actually nothing. It was just that the 3-meter-long muzzle was quite terrifying. If it was shorter, it would probably look like the tip of a ballpoint pen or an electric soldering iron. However, no matter how long it was hard to believe that this machine was a long-range weapon. Other things aside, the spikes at the muzzle looked like they were used to stab or ram, but it would be too strange to call it a battering ram. But unfortunately, it was indeed a weapon. Dr. Gadotsi and Matthew asked Roman, who was in charge of Chaldea and had the knowledge of the database. Ahem, this. Roman's answer was stuttering, and it was obvious that he didn't know. This is the seal of divinity, Dinger. Wuming answered Gadotsi and Matthew on behalf of Roman. Dinger. Gadotsi and Matthew nodded thoughtfully. However, Gadotsi asked his question in a serious manner. By the way, assassin, what is the seal of divinity, Dinger? This time, Gilgamesh answered Gadotsi before Wuming could. It's a weapon used to launch this king's treasure, using the instantaneous magic power as a cannonball. Treasure? Matthew and Gadotsi were a little confused. Could it be that just gold and silver could be used as a cannonball? Would it be weak? The two of them were full of doubts as they had never seen a cannonball being launched. However, it was indeed so. After all, the treasure of this era seemed a little difficult for Gadotsi and Matthew to understand. At that moment, Wuming simply explained to the two of them. To put it simply, it's actually a treasure that can be called a noble phantasm. It's loaded and launched as a cannonball. Noble phantasm. The reason why Wuming said so was because it was easy to understand a noble phantasm. When Wuming said so, Gadotsi and Matthew instantly understood. Both of their eyes were full of disbelief. Did it have to be so extravagant? Not only Gadotsi and Matthew, but Roman was also shocked. Noble phantasm. Is this the so-called collapse of fantasy? It's such a waste. Roman sighed helplessly from Gadotsi's bracelet. Noble phantasm was the crystallization of humans' fantasy. It was not a problem to call it the collapse of fantasy. After hearing what Roman said, Gadotsi and Matthew agreed with Roman, which was rare. I see. It's indeed a very appropriate description. Matthew nodded in agreement. It's rare for the doctor to say something that's right. Roman was a little sad about what Gadotsi said. However, he had been through a lot and gradually got used to it. Using a noble phantasm as a cannonball and launching it to cause an explosion. Theoretically, it could cause a lot of damage, but is it really okay to be so wasteful? Roman was once again worried about Gilgamesh's reckless waste. Human history is a waste of history. If that's the case, this king's phantasm should be used this way. Gilgamesh's courage let Gadotsi and Mashu once again witness Gilgamesh's excellent side. He's indeed the most ancient hero king. Matthew once again praised Gilgamesh in a serious manner. If it were me, I would probably be very reluctant. Gadotsi smiled embarrassedly. Isn't that obvious? The only one who can easily do this is this king, who has all the treasures in this world. Ha ha. Gilgamesh laughed happily. This made Wuming shake his head helplessly again. The king would not hesitate to accept the compliments and be happy, because it was an affirmation of the king. King Gilgamesh, it's time for you to explain the mission that you've given to Zhuge Kongming. Although that was what Wuming said, Wuming could almost guess it. After all, the divine right seal, Dinger, on the stone platform in front of them was obviously different from the one that Wuming knew. When Wuming saw the divine right seal, Dinger, he understood the mission that Gilgamesh had given to Zhuge Kongming. It was probably to modify the divine right seal, Dinger. It's just as you think, Henryong. This king has given the military counselor the task of modifying the divine right seal, Dinger. Chapter 945. King Gilgamesh's Seal of Divine Right, Dinger, is a weapon that uses the magic power generated by the destruction of treasures to cause large-scale damage. Although this weapon has a very obvious effect on killing demonic beasts, its effect on the commander of the demonic beasts is negligible. Zhuge Kongming stepped forward and explained to everyone. Ordinary magical beasts wouldn't be that much stronger even if they were strengthened. However, magical beast commanders were different. Dinger's bombardment couldn't cause the slightest bit of damage to magical beast commanders. The most it could do was burn off some of its fur and scrape off some of its scales. In the face of demons with extremely strong physiques, Gilgamesh entrusted me to modify the Seal of Divine Authority into a weapon that could kill them with a single blow. Therefore, I modified the muzzle of the Seal of Divine Authority into a concentrated cannon. Originally, the Seal of Divine Authority used King Gilgamesh's treasures as bullets and fired them in the form of bullets. Now it has been converted into a continuous laser radiation. After hitting the target, the energy will spread throughout the target's body and destroy the target's molecular structure. In other words, the Seal of Divine Authority, which was originally an area of effect weapon, had been modified by Zhuge Kongming into a single target weapon. So that's how it is. It's specially designed to deal with demons. Gadotsi then contacted Roman. Doctor, what do you think? Roman, who was in Chaldea, tapped on the keyboard in front of him. Obviously, he was examining and analyzing the Seal of Divine Authority in front of Gadotsi. The muzzle of the Seal of Divine Authority has indeed been converted into a concentrated cannon. However, because Chaldea does not have any specific data on demons, I have no way of determining whether it will be effective against them. You don't have to do it. This king can determine that the new Seal of Divine Authority will definitely be effective against demons. It seemed that Gilgamesh was full of confidence in the new Seal of Divine Authority. He did not know whether it was because he believed in his own judgment or Zhuge Kongming's technology. King Gilgamesh is sensible. After all, It took me 3 months to modify it. Not only demons, but also servants, as long as the target is hit, the only outcome waiting for them is to retreat. Although Zhuge Kongming's words sounded quite lofty, Wu Ming still found a problem. Military counselor, listening to what you mean, this thing can still miss? Yes. This made Gerdatsi Mashu, and even Roman from Chaldea break out in cold sweat. It was the first time that they saw a weapon they designed not being able to hit the enemy, but still being able to say yes. However, Wu Ming's question was indeed full of problems, so he simply helped Zhuge Kongming to smooth things over. The situation of missing is bound to happen. After all, the damage has changed from an area of effect to a single point. The demons won't stand there stupidly and let you hit them. They just need to aim and fire a few more times. That's impossible. The modified seal of divine authority will be scrapped after firing once. What? Zhuge Kongming's words completely shocked everyone. Although Gilgamesh did not say anything, he also showed a shocked expression. Obviously, Gilgamesh did not expect that Zhuge Kongming would transform the seal of divine authority into this. Then in that case, wouldn't the seal of divine authority become a consumable? Although Matthew's words contained uncertainty, everyone present understood that the modified seal of divine authority by Zhuge Kongming was indeed a consumable. Then Zhuge Kongming's expression was quite calm, and he spoke disapprovingly. The magic converted from the destroyed treasures in the seal of divine authority is unstable. That's why it can be used as a cannonball. I stabilized the cannonball's magic and concentrated it at a single point. Not only that, but I also increased the damage by ignoring the burden on the seal of divine authority. Although the cost is the self-destruction of the seal of divine authority, but overall, the damage caused has been increased to the extreme. Then Zhuge Kongming changed the topic. Although I'm a caster magician, I'm not good at making items. My ability is more focused on the battlefield. Creating a weapon that can deal extreme damage without causing a burden to the seal of divine authority, Dinger, is slightly beyond my ability. Although Zhuge Kongming belittled himself, the fact that he was able to transform the interior of the seal of divine authority was enough to prove that Zhuge Kongming's ability to make items was not low. After all, the strategist type of caster and the writer type of caster also had drawbacks when making items. But even so, Zhuge Kongming still transformed the Dinger into a satisfactory appearance. In the end, Zhuge Kongming gave a key answer. Moreover, as long as I can hit the monster commander, all the problems will not be a problem, right? Matthew was surprised. Yes, it is indeed as Mr. Kongming said. Although the seal of divine authority can only be used as a one-time consumable, as long as we can hit the monster commander, it will be fine. As long as we can hit the monster commander, we will be able to kill it. Matthew clenched his fists in front of his chest, looking quite cute. However, the expression on everyone's face gave Matthew a look of disapproval. As for the reason, it was very simple, after all. If we use this modified seal of divine authority to attack the monster commander, it will be easy for the monster commander to dodge the attack. Wu Ming sighed. Even if the monster commander is not aware of the danger, this method can only be used once. After all, the other magical beast commanders weren't blind. If they saw that the Dinger's attack could easily kill a magical beast commander, the other magical beast commanders would definitely pay attention to it. It would be even more difficult to hit it the next time. However, I don't think it will succeed once. After all, monster commanders have senses that are many times better than human beings. Their prediction of danger is also very strong. They will definitely be able to dodge it. As the last straw that broke the camel's back, Roman said a statement that cut off everyone's hope. Sure enough, we can only give up. Gudatsi couldn't help but show a disappointed expression. At this time, Zhuge Kongming confidently interrupted everyone. No, if we use a trick, we can actually let the modified divine power seal, Dinger, attack the demon's commander. Chapter 946. That's right. Zhuge Kongming was an outstanding person in terms of intelligence. Although Zhuge Kongming was not as outstanding as his contemporaries, that didn't mean that Zhuge Kongming wasn't good enough. It was just like how peacocks and phoenixes were not outstanding, but peacocks were much more colorful and outstanding than most birds. And judging from the fact that Zhuge Kongming's plan was effective, Zhuge Kongming's plan wasn't that bad. On the contrary, Zhuge Kongming was a completely trustworthy strategist. The reason why Zhuge Kongming designed the Divine Right Seal, Dinger, to be a powerful attack at the cost of self-destruction was probably because he was confident in his plan. Putting aside the demonic beast commander who was using Enkidu's body, there were still 4 demonic beast commanders that had to be eliminated. If the Divine Right Seal, Dinger, was used properly, it would have a 100% chance of hitting the demonic beast commanders. They would definitely be able to eliminate the demonic beast commanders without using Funbaba or Gugalana. Well, let's listen to this king's words then. This king trusts you a lot, Gilgamesh nodded. It seemed that he valued Zhuge Kongming's brains a lot. At that moment, no one said anything more. After all, Gilgamesh had already said it. By the way, strategist Kongming, how many Divine Right Seals, Dinger, have you modified? However, Zhuge Kongming said a number that made everyone's jaws drop. 1. Suddenly no one said a word. The air seemed to have frozen. It was silent and cold. Wu Ming, who was the first to react, reached out his hand and slowly covered his ears. What? Gadotsi, Matthew, Roman, and even Leonardo da Vinci, who had been watching from the side, all let out shocking shouts. The sound waves were like shock waves, even causing the illusion that the entire cave was shaking. By the way, Gil, do you know about this? Wu Ming slowly put down his hands that were covering his ears, and couldn't help but ask Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh, who was not affected by Gadotsi and the other's sonic attack, nodded. Indeed, this king knows about this. After all, this is the only dinger that this king gave to military counselor. The others are either in Uruk or in the North Wall. Immediately, everyone revealed a helpless expression. After all this time, it turned out that there was a problem on Gilgamesh's side. No. In fact, even if you give me more dinger, I can only modify 1 at the moment. 3 months is already my limit. Although Zhuge Kongming said so, there was no trace of shame on his face. Gadotsi and Matthew were still in a state of shock. Roman and Leonardo da Vinci, who were in Chaldea, also looked powerless. This turn of events was too much for them to bear. I take back my words of praise for Zhuge Kongming. After spending 3 months, he was only able to modify 1 dinger. There was no one else in the world who could do that. Thinking about how Zhuge Kongming's Stone Warrior 8 formations covered more than half of Mesopotamia, could it be that Zhuge Kongming's skill points were all spent on formation? Cough. Let's organize the information. All in all, we only have 1 dinger that can be used on a monster commander, right? Apart from Gilgamesh, everyone, including Zhuge Kongming, nodded silently. Wu Ming could not help but facepalm. Actually, it was not that bad. After all, at most, they had returned to the state before they met Zhuge Kongming. Since there is only 1 dinger, let's keep it as a ghost card for now. After all, there was only 1 modified dinger. There was no way to keep it as a consumable item. It might be useful as a ghost card. By the way, Gil, did you bring me here just to show me this? Previously, Gilgamesh had given orders and criticisms to everyone in the tower. Only Gilgamesh had requested to talk to Wu Ming privately. Although he had brought along Gadotsi and Matthew, it did not prevent Gilgamesh and Wu Ming from having a private chat. At the same time, Wu Ming did not think that Gilgamesh had called him for such a small matter. Even if the modified seal of Divine Right, Dinger, could destroy the demon commander in 1 strike, Silent Wonder wouldn't think that it was a big deal. After all, there was no need for Silent Wonder to personally see such a thing. All he needed to do was to display its effects on the battlefield. Of course, there is something else. Gilgamesh showed an expression that said, Henryong knows me best. Then he walked to the corner and knocked on the stone wall. Come here and feel it with your magic. Wu Ming walked over and placed his hand on the stone wall. Then he injected his magic into the wall. In an instant, a magnificent 3D projection appeared in Wu Ming's mind. This was the scene of the area covered by the stone formation. Everything on the ground could be seen clearly by Wu Ming. Many soldiers in the North Wall were undergoing emergency maintenance, as if a war was imminent. Leonidas, I was constantly training the soldiers. Carts of supplies were pushed out of a military tent that was much larger than the other military tents. There were also people who could smile even in the face of the monster crisis. What is this? Wuming could not help but look at Gilgamesh, who was beside him. The stone formation is used to monitor the situation on the ground. As a result, there is no way for him to investigate the situation on the ground. However, if there is someone with magic with the help of the stone formation, they can detect everything on the ground and underground. It is like a god's perspective. However, Wuming was still puzzled. What did this have to do with him? Wouldn't it be better to just find someone with magic? The reason why I called you over is because I received a mud tablet from the front line. It says that many magical beasts seem to be gathering in Nippur. Just by looking at their numbers, it seems like they are preparing for an unprecedented attack by magical beasts. After hearing Gilgamesh's words, Wuming subconsciously turned his attention to the place outside the north wall. If there is someone with more powerful magic, they will be able to see further places. Even this king is unable to observe the nearest city. At present, I am afraid that only you, Henryong, can do it. Therefore, the reason why Wuming was called over was to investigate the truth of the information sent from the front line. After all, the monster wave also had a monster wave commander. It was very likely that the monster wave had confused the humans. Therefore, they had to investigate. As Gilgamesh said, Wuming's magic was indeed the highest on their side. Even Ishtar's magic was not comparable to Wuming's. Just as Gilgamesh had said, the area covered by the stone soldier formation was only a small part of the northern wall. It was far from the extent of scouting the nearby cities. However, it was probably as Gilgamesh had said. Due to the large amount of mana, Silent Cry was able to see a few kilometers away from the northern wall. Chapter 947. Although he only caught a glimpse of it for a moment, the scene of magical beasts gathering and demons dancing was deeply imprinted in Wuming's mind. It was a city that had long been turned into ruins, and there were a large number of magical beasts of various shapes and sizes gathered there. The liger-type magical beasts roared at the sky, while the snake-type magical beasts breathed out on the ground. It was comparable to a group of demons dancing and 100 ghosts walking at night. The number of magical beasts shocked Wuming. There were at least tens of thousands of magical beasts. It was hard to imagine that so many magical beasts could gather in such a city. And from the glimpse just now, Wuming also saw that many magical beasts were still gathering there. It really looked like they were preparing for a big battle. Your information is correct, Gil. I saw a large number of magical beasts gathering in the ruins of Nippur. There are more than 10,000 magical beasts, and it's still increasing. Wuming could not help but frown. Oh, so it's like this. Gilgamesh frowned with his arms crossed in front of his chest. The magical beasts were really preparing for a big general attack. Kalis, can you project the scene I just saw from my mind? However, Kalis did not answer whether she could or could not. Instead, she began to execute Wuming's order. Yes, master. The dragon horn on Wuming's head fired a ray of magic at the wall. In an instant, a projected image appeared on the wall. It was the scene that Wuming had caught a glimpse of before. Wow. It's really a projection. Godatsi shouted in surprise and trotted to Wuming's side. Sure enough, Miss Kalis is very powerful. Matthew was amazed. Although he did not run like Godatsi, he still walked over, extracting the scene from Wuming's mind in an instant and projecting it. This once again proved that Kalis was an advanced magic dress. Sure enough, Kalis is a very advanced magic dress. If it was Leonardo da Vinci, it would not be possible to make it. Roman could not help but praise. However, for some reason, Roman's voice stopped abruptly as if fate had grasped his throat. I see such an ability. It is indeed the work of the gem master. At this time, Leonardo da Vinci's voice came from Godatsi's bracelet. Leonardo da Vinci's kiss? Godatsi instantly felt that something was wrong. Not only Godatsi, but Matthew, who was standing next to Godatsi, was also shocked. At the same time, Roman, who was in Chaldea with his back facing Leonardo da Vinci, showed an expression that said, "I'm done for." Leonardo da Vinci certainly could not make a magic dress like Callis. This was an indisputable fact. However, although it was a fact, whether or not he could say it in front of Leonardo da Vinci was another matter. By the way, the content of this projection is really bad. Leonardo da Vinci's tone was deliberately serious, giving a feeling that he was using force. The reason why Leonardo da Vinci could see it was because the screen in front of Guidazzi and Roman was transmitting the image that Guidazzi saw to Chaldea through the bracelet-type communication device worn by Guidazzi. Although the image that appeared in front of Guidazzi and the others was only a few seconds, everything in the image was the same as what Wu Ming had described. If the magical beasts were serious and launched an all-out attack, the humans would definitely not be able to resist. The magical beasts had gathered in large numbers, and the place where the magical beasts gathered was the nearest city to the north wall, Nippur. Therefore, the magical beasts preparing to attack the north wall was the most likely scenario. That was why Leonardo da Vinci said that the situation was bad. However, Guidazzi and Matthew did not have time to pay attention to the current situation. They were concerned about Leonardo da Vinci, who was in Chaldea, and Roman, who had not spoken since Leonardo da Vinci spoke. Leonardo da Vinci, are you okay? Matthew did not dare to directly ask Roman about the situation. He could only beat around the bush. Could it be that Dr. Roman had been killed? Guidazzi and Matthew thought of the same thing. I am the genius Leonardo da Vinci, what could happen to me? Don't worry, I asked Roman to help me make coffee. Huh? Why is Leonardo da Vinci so calm this time? Guidazzi was quite puzzled. He did not scold or attack, but just asked Roman to help him make coffee? Could it be that Leonardo da Vinci had developed a resistance to such things? I will unilaterally close the communication. As for the magical beasts in the projection, Chaldea still has to conduct a detailed analysis. Maybe there will be an unexpected discovery. For example, with so many magical beasts gathered, where did the commander go? Okay, Leonardo da Vinci, you go do your thing in Chaldea. Then Leonardo da Vinci unilaterally closed the communication. After the communication was disconnected, Guidazzi and Matthew were relieved. From Leonardo da Vinci's words, she did not seem to be angry this time. However, Wu Ming noticed some details and sighed helplessly in his heart. Roman, you have to hold on. In Chaldea's control room, Roman pulled Leonardo da Vinci's arm that was handcuffed to his neck. His face was a little red, and he struggled hard to not be strangled. Leonardo da Vinci looked at the screen in front of him with a smile. After confirming that the communication was closed, he let go of the arm that almost strangled Roman to death. Cough cough. Cough 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 cough. Da Vinci's dear. Cough cough. Do you want to kill me? Roman laid on the table in front of him as if he was saved. He kept coughing and spoke weakly. He was just a human, and Leonardo da Vinci was a servant. Even the weakest servant's strength was not comparable to that of a human. It would be great if Mr. Roman could be strangled to death. Leonardo da Vinci said with a smile. People who didn't know would think that he was concerned about someone. Sure enough, Leonardo da Vinci said that he was fine, but his body was particularly in line with his thoughts. Roman felt that if it wasn't for the screen between Wu Ming and Leonardo da Vinci, even if the other party was Wu Ming, Leonardo da Vinci would still dare to go up. I have collected the projection just now, don't forget to analyze it, Leonardo da Vinci said, picked up a cup of coffee on the corner of the table and left. She really went to make coffee just now. Really leaving things to me again. But when he thought that he just survived Leonardo da Vinci's capture, he didn't say anything more. Roman got up and went to the corner of the table, picked up another cup of coffee on the corner of the table. Leonardo da Vinci didn't just make a cup of coffee. Roman noticed that the staff of Chaldea had turned their eyes to him. Work hard. Then, he reprimanded them in a neither light nor heavy tone. Yes, sure enough, it didn't have much effect, but everyone still gave Roman face and immediately retracted their gaze. Only Roman, who seemed to have accepted his fate, returned to his seat tiredly. You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.